Hey, Taleblazers!
I'm Rebecca Cunningham.
I'm Francesca, and this is Girl Tales.
A kids podcast packed with girl power and stories where every child's voice matters. Before we get started, I'd like to wish a very happy 9th birthday to Joan in Brooklyn, New York. Joan, thank you so much for listening to Girl Tales. I hope you have an awesome birthday. Grownups, Girl Tales is brought to you by families like yours. If you would like to hear your child's name at the top of our next episode, or if you would like me to wish them a happy birthday, head to patreon.com/girltales and join a team today. Now on to our episode. This is Thea versus the Minotaurs. Enjoy! I'd like to tell you about a friend of mine. Her name is Thea, and we first met when she was in 7th grade at Freshwater Middle School. Thea is tall. There are many other things that she wished people noticed about her first, like her cool green-rimmed glasses, her perfectly straight teeth after years of wearing braces, or her high-top Converse signed by the Caitlin Clark at a Fever game last fall. But no. The first thing anyone ever says when they meet her is, "Wow, you're tall." "Yep, guess I ate my Wheaties," Thea would always respond, smirking and looking away shyly. Being almost 6 foot tall at 13 years old had its perks, though, Thea had to admit. She was riding all the best rides at the theme park before she could tie her own shoelaces. She'd been able to reach the cookie jar on top of the fridge since she was 9. And she was really good at basketball. To be fair, Thea would be really good at basketball no matter how tall she was. Her ball handling skills were hard to match for her age, and she was consistent on the three-point line. But being almost 6 feet tall helped make her one of the best centers the Freshwater Unicorns had seen in years. Which is why no one was surprised when the Freshwater girls basketball team made it to that season's regional championship finals. But it was a surprise when the Freshwater boys team did too. They played great all season, but the boys team had somehow managed to lose a player every single game. First, their star point guard tripped over a back-flipping cheerleader. Then, their center kept hitting his head on things, having grown nearly half a foot over winter break. Their power forward had a stomach bug. The small forward and his family had to suddenly move back to Indiana, and their best shooter had carpal tunnel from playing too much Minecraft. With only 4 players left on the team and the championship game fast approaching, no one knew what to do. The boys' team would be playing against their longtime rivals, the Silverside Minotaurs. And the Minotaurs were scary. Their point guard was short, but he was fast and hardly ever seemed to miss a shot. And the rest of the team, well, the rumors are that they all got held back in kindergarten. These guys were big, all 6 foot at least, and easily looked like they could have been high school seniors. One of them had a full handlebar mustache. They'd lost to the Minotaurs 4 times that season, and so beating them in the finals felt especially important. But the 4 remaining boy players weren't exactly starting material. There was Bruce, who'd make an excellent center if he'd just agreed to wear his glasses. The twins, Rick and Tom, who were both decent forwards when they weren't arguing with each other. And Steve, a small kid with big glasses who had been the coach's assistant up until the game before last. Steve was, a good sport. The boys and girls teams gathered around the bleachers before practice to try and figure out a plan.
"All right, folks, I need some help with a little brainstorm here,"
said Coach Bob of the boys' team.
"We've tried just about everything we can think of, asking for volunteer players during morning announcements, having sign-ups during lunch, going by the rec center and church hoops to see if anyone plays ball that we don't know about, but I think Freshwater is freshly tapped out of middle school basketball talent."
"Tapped out of boys' talent,"
Coach Ev of the girls' team corrected him.
"True, sorry. To be honest, we don't even really need talent,"
Bob admitted.
"That's right.
said Steve.
At a persistent 4'9", I wouldn't say I'm exactly built to ball, but I do see this as a sort of civic duty. And we appreciate it. Thank you, Steve.
Coach Ev said.
But unless we find another boy, any boy, one player, you'll have to forfeit.
Are we sure it has to be a boy? Thea asked.
That's how the league is split.
Coach Bob responded, shaking his head.
But for just one game, can't one of us girls play just so you don't have to forfeit?
Thea asked, knowing how much this game meant to her friends on the other team.
We're 15-4 this season,
Steve said.
Even after losing 5 players. Are we going to let all that hard work go to waste? Why? Because a girl can't play on the boys' team?
Listen, of course we looked into the rules.
Coach Bob said.
And like many rules, they are unclear.
Right.
Coach Ev agreed.
A girl can play on the boys' basketball team when there is no girls' team for her to play on. But that's all it says. And we do have a girls' team.
So we aren't sure yet.
Coach Bob continued.
We want to call the Minotaurs coach and the championship director to see what they'd want to do.
Thea looked at the rest of her team, most of whom were looking back and forth at each other. Everyone on her team was excellent, and any one of them would be a great addition to the boys' team. But after some discussion, the girls agreed that Thea was the most well-rounded player. She was a great center, but she could also shoot and dribble circles around the rest of them.
I would do it,
Thea said nervously.
As long as you guys don't, make a whole big deal about it or anything. I hate being the center of attention. I mean, we won't make a big deal out of it,
Coach Ev began.
But that's sort of all we can promise.
Coach Bob and Coach Ev looked at each other and back at Thea. She nodded, and Bob went off to make the calls. He was on the phone for quite a while before Coach Bob's face lit up with a smile. He looked back at the team and gave them a thumbs up. The Minotaurs had agreed. Thea could play on the boys' team.
All right.
Yeah, Thea, thank you so much. All right.
Thea.
Well, the game is tomorrow night, so we won't have too much time for practice. But let's see what we can do,
Coach Bob said. He blew his whistle and gave Thea a high five as she ran over to the boys' practice court.
Center?
She asked, assuming because of her height.
I'm taller.
Bruce said, which was maybe true by a millimeter.
Yes, but more importantly, she can shoot, and you can't.
Coach Bob responded, passing Thea the ball.
Point guard, if that's cool.
Very, Thea said with a smile. Tomorrow's game would be an interesting one. Thea's classes the next day were a blur, and she got in trouble twice by her teachers for staring out the window. She was nervous. Word had spread quickly that she'd be playing in the boys' finals, and everyone seemed very excited, exactly what she hadn't wanted. Thea sat down with the rest of the boys' team at lunch and couldn't help but notice people whispering and pointing. Some people even clapped or gave her a thumbs up when Thea walked by, which she was supremely not a fan of.
I don't get what the big deal is,
Thea said to Rick, Tom, Bruce, and Steve as they all made a mess of that afternoon's sloppy joes.
I'm a starter on the girls' team. This isn't a huge switch for me. Really, Steve is the one going from assistant coach's assistant,
Steve corrected,
to a starter basically overnight. That's much more impressive in my opinion.
Thea finished.
Listen, no one was expecting us to stand a chance before you joined the team,
Steve tried to explain.
Hey!
Rick and Tom said together, offended.
Well, it's true.
Steve continued.
You two can't go a quarter without arguing with each other.
No way. Yeah, huh?
And Bruce, I love you, but you really need glasses, my guy,
Steve added.
Not true. My vision is perfect.
Bruce responded.
How many fingers am I holding up, Bruce?
3.
I wasn't holding up any fingers, Bruce.
Well, then that was a trick question.
We didn't stand a chance before you joined the team, Thea. Everyone's excited because maybe now we do.
No pressure, Thea thought before taking too big a bite of her sandwich. The first half of the boys' final felt like it was 5 minutes long, but it was shaping up to be a very close game. At Steve's suggestion, Rick and Tom were counting to 10 instead of yelling at each other. And although there was almost constant counting on the court, it seemed to be working.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Bruce had a pair of glasses at home after all. He finally decided to wear them, and boy, did it make a difference. He was getting almost every other rebound, and his downcourt passes were always reaching their target. And Steve was actually holding his own. He was by no means the game's MVP, but he made a couple of very important free throws and planned a few plays that gave the Freshwater Unicorns an early lead. But the Silverside Minotaurs were not missing a beat. They had clearly earned their spot in the finals and weren't going to be giving up without a fight. Plus, even Thea felt small next to these guys who definitely weren't taking it easy on her because she was a girl. Mustache Boy had knocked her over getting more than one rebound. Thea was really the standout so far, though. People were surprised to see someone so tall move as gracefully as Thea did. She always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, and, as always, was more than consistent on the three-point line. She had scored most of the Unicorns' points in the first half and was doing a great job guarding the Minotaurs' star shooter on defense. By the time they had reached the end of the first half, the Unicorns had a small lead, but they were feeling exhausted. Thea spent a few minutes alone in the girls' locker room during halftime, before Coach Ev came in looking worried. She said they needed to talk as a team, and Thea met the rest of the Unicorn players outside.
All right, guys, players. Listen up. There's been some discussion about the rules.
Coach Bob began, glancing across the court at the Minotaurs' coach, who was standing with his arms crossed, staring daggers at them.
What do you mean?
Steve asked.
I thought they already agreed that Thea could play.
Yeah, what, are they scared now because I'm actually good? She asked, her face flushing red.
Well, regardless of why, the other team's coach brought up something that's going to be hard for us to fight.
Coach Ev began to explain.
They say that according to the rules, one player is not allowed to play in the championship game for two different teams. A rule that's in place so one all-star player can't win the finals for both of their school's teams at once, which in this case would mean Thea.
I can't play in the girls' finals?
The refs agree that since you didn't know before, you can choose to sit out now and still be allowed to play in the girls' final.
Coach Bob began.
But that would mean
the boys' team would forfeit.
That's right.
Thea had an incredibly hard choice to make. I don't want to sit out of the girls' finals. She began, processing her thoughts out loud with the rest of the team. I worked so hard all year, and we deserve to play that finals game together as a team. The Minotaurs coach had no problem with a girl joining the team yesterday. They're calling in this rule now because they're afraid. The boys' team nodded along in agreement. The first 2 quarters were hard, and their whole team was exhausted. And the Minotaurs still had 3 players on the bench about to sub in for the first time in the second half. They weren't anywhere near as tired, and Thea wasn't sure if she had enough left in the tank. But she thought back to what Steve said at lunch that day. People weren't excited because there was a girl playing in the boys' final. They were excited because they thought she could win. Nearly everyone in Freshwater was at that game, myself included, cheering Thea and the rest of the Unicorns on. And apparently now, the Minotaurs thought that she could win too. I never walk away from a challenge. So she tightened up the laces of her Converse, patted Caitlin Clark's signature for good luck, and headed back out there to crush the second half. The rest of the girls' team would have to forgive her. Besides, they had more than enough players to have a strong team in tomorrow's game without her. The boys' team needed her too, and she wasn't going to give up on them.
You got this, Thea. Let's go, Unicorns!
Coach Bob yelled as they started the second half, and crush it she did. Thea was feeding off the crowd's energy and stole the ball from the Minotaurs twice in the third quarter to pull back ahead. But the Minotaurs seemed to take that personally and started guarding Thea 2-1. They had realized little old Steve didn't really need guarding, and with 2 lumbering Minotaurs on her whenever she had the ball, all Thea could do for the last half of the fourth quarter was try to pass it back to someone else. Suddenly, the tides had turned, and with 30 seconds left on the clock, the Minotaurs pulled ahead by 2. Thea had the ball and was approaching half court. She could see the 2 towering players about to run up to guard her, with the other players guarding Rick, Tom, and Bruce. Looking down the court, suddenly, Thea saw her lane. It was as if the other players' bodies turned into a maze, and she could see her way right through it. She ducked and dodged, dribbling the ball between the player's legs and around that player's back. The crowd roared as she weaved her way through the maze of players. But by the time she had gotten to the hoop, she was covered. With 2 guys on her and seconds on the clock, Thea couldn't even see the basket. But she didn't need to. She could see Steve wide open at the 3-point line. When she made eye contact, Steve's heart froze.
No! Oh, no, don't pass it here.
He shouted, waving Thea off frantically. But there was no time. Steve was their only hope. Thea passed him the ball, and with just seconds left on the clock, he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and took a shot. It was as if time slowed. Everyone held their breath as the ball soared through the air, past the arms of the defenders, and went straight into the hoop. He had done it! Steve scored a last-second 3-pointer to win the championship finals.
Steve, you did it. You saved the game. You did it, buddy. Oh, my goodness, Steve. Nice shot.
The crowd went nuts, and Rick and Tom ran over to lift Steve on their shoulders this time. Everyone flooded onto the court cheering. It really was one of the best basketball games I had ever seen. Thea could not stop smiling, and best of all, she was so happy that Steve made the winning point. But Thea was proud of herself, too. She had given it her all, sacrificed her chance at the girls' championship match, and was the center of attention for basically an entire day. All for her friends on the boys' team. And she'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. As they lined up to shake the other team's hand, the Minotaurs all met them with a smile. They had expected this to be a walk in the park and had clearly underestimated Thea and the rest of the unicorns. Good game.
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 Good game. They all said to each other, and they meant it. The girls went on to win their finals game too, which was a surprise to no one. And before long, everything in Freshwater settled down and life went back to normal. Thea went on to play in the girls' championship finals the next year and was named the game's MVP. And to this day, you can see her photo with Steve, Rick, Bruce, and Tom cheering in the trophy case at Freshwater Middle School. That was Thea versus the Minotaurs. Written, produced, and performed by Chad Chenail. Performed and executive produced by Rebecca Cunningham, with help from the Taleblazers who attended our Washington, D.C. event. Abby, Francesca, Gia, Julia, Laurel, Leah, Linnea, Quinn, and Sorenne. Girl Tales is a Cordelia Studios production. Grownups, you can get access to ad-free episodes of Girl Tales, as well as a range of other shows for the kids in your life by subscribing to Starglow Plus on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to hear me narrate the original stories of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, or Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, head to patreon.com/Grownups. Girl Tales and join Team Sunnybrook or above. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you loved this story, share it with a friend. Oh, and remember, I believe in you.
There's a hill and a road and a path where I know you must go. Through the sun, wind, rain, or snow. But wherever you venture, you can always come home. 'Cause I trust your heart, I trust my heart, and I trust your mind, I trust my mind, and I trust the friends, I trust the friends. I know you will find o'er the hill and on the road.